Good evening, Shabbat Shalom. Okay. How is everybody?
We're all good.
I told you, I don't talk, for hours and days at a time at home,
We're all here.
because I don't have a pet even, so if I started talking to the furniture, that'd be bad. But, and when John comes home, he needs to have me be quiet for a long time, so. What? Well, you do, sort of. Okay, moving on to the announcements. Thank you for all your generous giving to the congregation. I'm here to remind you that the blue boxes in the back are very lonely, and they would like to talk to you. And if you put something in them, you'll hear them say, "Thank you." So please make the blue boxes happy too. Where are we? We still are streaming the live services. So if you hear something you like, and if you think a friend or a neighbor or a relative in somewhere far off would like it, the information is in your bulletin about 2/3 of the way down the page. If you wanted to look at it, or if you wanted to listen to it again when you're having a lovely cup of tea at home, that might be very nice for you too. Please do not pick up your phone because John can see you. And you may look to the uninitiated like you're praying or doing something very holy while you're doing this, but really we know. And if we know, guess who else knows? Okay, just a word to the wise. We want no lightning striking in the sanctuary, really. That would be very, very disastrous. Saturday morning services, I see, are starting tomorrow. Yes. So, I think they're gonna start, whether you all come or not. But I have heard many people, including members of my own family, have said, I do better in the morning. So if you or friends or relatives or anyone you know would do better worshiping in the morning, please look at this. It's going to start tomorrow at 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. rather, in this room, right?
Yes.
Okay, in this room. All right. Well, welcome. Are you good? So I see up here, even though last week was technically the week for Balaam's donkey and the donkey's questionnaire to Bala and the rider of the donkey. But I see out of a donkey's mouth. So remember what we're going to remember. If God can speak through a donkey, he can speak through me or you or anybody else. Okay, so is that what we're having today, dear? He's nodding, so you'll look forward to that. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
I noticed that I moved the furniture around and moved it back, so now we're set. And as we begin our services this week, we're going to insert something we inadvertently left out, and that's Lechat Odi, pages 14 to 25. Because this is a special time, Shabbat is a special time, that we can encounter God in a special way on his special day, because he's made us his special people. And so we respond to him as we stand and as we literally welcome Shabbat, as we turn and face the door. We welcome Shabbat the Queen, but we also anticipate the coming King, the Bethlehemite, who draws near, bringing us redemption. Pages 14 to 25.
Lecha dodi likat hala, b'nei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha dodi likat hala. Lecha Dodi Likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Shamor v'zechor v'dibur echad, Hishnianu el hamyuchad. Adonai echad u'shamo echad, L'shano tiferet v'likila. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha, Ki hi mikor habracha. Merosh mikadem nesucha, Sof ma'aseh b'maksheva tchila. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Ina ari ne'afachuni, Lishay Dikei Tifatechami. Al Yad ben Yishai bet halachi, Kara el nafshi ge'ala. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Ito Ravi, Kiva Urekui Ori, Shir Tebeli, Kevod Adonai Elohim Nigla. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat Kala, Panei Shabbat Nekabela.
Page 23.
Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Observe and remember, in a single statement, the unique God caused us to hear his command. He alone is Lord, and his name is unique, to his fame and splendor and praise. Together, come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Let's go to meet the Sabbath, for she is the source of blessing from the beginning. Anointed from ancient days, though made last, conceived first. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Shake the dust off yourself, rise. Dress in garments of glory, my people. Jesse's son, the Bethlehemite, draws near, bringing us redemption. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath. Wake up, your light has come. Arise, shine, awake, awake. Sing a grand song. The glory of God is revealed to you. Come, my friend, meet the bride. Let's welcome the presence of the Sabbath.
You may be seated. The last line was, the glory of God is revealed to you. This is something, a reality that not only did Israel experience in the wilderness, well, most of the people are over here, I feel like I should lean this way. It's a reality most of the people of Israel experienced when they were walking with God in the wilderness. And it's a reality that that traveling prophet, the rider of the donkey, realized as well when he penned or he articulated, Ma tovu lo halech, how goodly are your tents, O Jacob. Why? Because God lives among those tents. And so, Jenny leads us, and we respond on pages 144 and 145.
Ma tovu Adonai ahavti me'on betecha, umkom mishkan kevodecha. V'ani ashtachaveh ve'ekra'a, evracha lifnei Adonai osi. V'ani tefilati lacha Adonai, et ratzon, Elohim berav chazdecha, aneni be'emet yishecha. How goodly are your tents, O Jacob, your dwelling places, O Israel. O Lord, through your abounding faithful love, I come into your house, and reverently I worship you in your holy sanctuary. I love being in your house, the place where your glory resides. Here I bow down to worship you, my Lord and Maker. Accept my prayer, O Lord, and answer with your great mercy and with your saving truth. Amen. Together? How lovely are your tabernacles, O Lord of hosts. I long, yes, I pine for the courts of the Lord. My heart joyfully sings to the living God. One thing have I asked of the Lord, that I will pursue, that I may live in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the graciousness of the Lord, and to enter his sanctuary. Teach me your way, O Lord, and lead me in the right path. With you is the fountain of life. In your light do we see light.
That closing reality is reflected in the lighting of the candles each Shabbat. With you is the fountain of life, and your light do we see light. And the lights of Shabbat remind us that God has committed himself to us permanently and made us his forever people. Shabbat is the sign of that as we bring in the Shabbat forward.
Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'hadlik ner shel Shabbat. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has set us apart from your commandments and commanded us to light the candles for the Sabbath. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu v'hadlik or v'goyim v'natan b'lamanu Yeshua HaMashiach Ha'or La'olam. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who sanctified us by your commandments and commanded us to be a light for the nations and gave us Yeshua our Messiah, the light of the world.
As that second blessing reminded us, he's given to us Yeshua the Messiah, the light of the world. And so now we, in effect, stand in the presence of Yeshua himself on pages 40 and 41 as we respond to Elohim Asher. He sits there in that heavenly throne, on one of those heavenly thrones, and we respond. Please join Jenny as she leads us on pages 40 and 41.
Elohim asher diber מקדם פעמים רבות ומרחים רבות אל האבות ביד הנביאים דיבר עלינו באחרית הימים האלה Yad Havein Asher, Someday Reish Kol, Ugado, Gamasa et Haolamim, Uzohar Kevodo, B'Tselem Atzmuto, Ve'osei Kol B'Dvaro, Rav HaGevura, U'lachar she'asa, Tihur Chatayim, Yashar Ve'erim, Ahadullah.
In the past, God spoke to our fathers through the prophets at many times in various ways. But now, at the end of days, he has spoken to us by the Messiah, his Son, whom he appointed the heir of all things, and through whom he made the universe. The Son is the full radiance of God's glory, and the flawless manifestation of his reality. He sustains all things by his powerful word. After he made atonement for sins, he sat down in the place of authority beside the majesty in heaven. True and firm, established and lasting, right and faithful, loved and treasured, desired and pleasant, feared and mighty, ordered and acceptable, good and beautiful is this word to us forever and ever.
Our praises continue as we respond with Sephardi Kaddish. Sephardi Kaddish, in a sense, picks up on Elohim Asher, because it reminds us while he's seen there, we await his return here. And the words of Sephardi Kaddish encourage us along those lines. Pages 156 and 157.
יתגדל ויתגדש שמי רבי, ועמד יברח ירותי, וימת מלכותי ויצמח כבר פני ויקרב משיחי. וחייכון וביומייכון וחי לכו בית ישראל, ויגלו בזמן קריב ומרבו אמן. יהי שמי רבא מבורך, לעולם ולעולם בעולמיה יתברך. יהי שמי רבא מבורך, לעולם ולעולם בעולמיה יתברך. וישתבח ויתפאר ויתחמם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל, שמי לחוד בריחו. לאלה מכל ברכתה, וישרתה תושבחתה ונחמתה, תמירן בעלמה וימרו אמן. יהי שמע רבא מן שמיה, וחיים טובים עלינו, ויכל ישראל וימרו אמן. עושה שלום במרומיו, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו, ויכל ישראל וימרו
Amen.
Glorified and sanctified be his great name in the world which is created according to his will. May he bring about the reign of his kingdom and cause his salvation to sprout and bring near his Messiah in your lifetime and in your days and in the life of all the house of Israel speedily, yes, soon, and let us say,
Amen.
May his great name be blessed forever and forever, eternally. Blessed and praised, glorified and exalted, extolled and honored, adored and lauded be the name of the Holy One, blessed be he, who is high above, far above all blessings and hymns and praises and consolations which are spoken in the world, and say, Amen. May there be great peace from heaven and good life for us and for all Israel, and say,
Amen.
He who makes peace in the heavenly realms, may he make peace for us and for all Israel. And let us all say,
Amen.
We continue as we were in the very throne room of God, so to speak, with our Tehillat Abrit Chadashah portion this evening. It's found on pages 1536 to 1537 in the Pew Bible. And we will do this section as we have become accustomed. Well, we became accustomed to doing it this way. And since we haven't been meeting for so long, we may have become unaccustomed to it. But anyhow, when you find those pages, you will see that there are some parts that are indented. Those parts that are indented are the parts that you respond with. I'll leave you with those parts that are unindented. All right, hopefully the directions are clear. The text begins. Ugrada hayiti varuach v'hinei kisei nir'ah v'shamayim ve'echad yoshev al ha'kisei. Being translated, I was there in heaven. Before me stood a throne, and on the throne someone was sitting. The one sitting there gleamed like diamonds and rubies, and a rainbow shining like an emerald encircled the throne. Surrounding the throne were 24 other thrones, and on the thrones sat 24 elders. From the throne came forth lightnings, voices, and thunderings. Sounds almost like Mount Sinai, doesn't it? And before the throne, quick pause, sorry to interrupt the response. That never occurred to me until this time that I just read it. See, sometimes you discover new things. Anyhow, where were we? From the throne came forth lightnings and voices and thunderings, and before the throne were 7 flaming torches. In front of the throne was a sea of glass, clear as crystal. In the center, around the throne, were 4 living creatures. I'm now at verse 8. Each of the 4 living beings had 6 wings. Day and night they never stopped saying,
Holy, holy, holy is Adonai, God of heaven's armies, the one who was, who is, and who is coming.
And whenever the living beings give glory, honor, and thanks to the one sitting on the throne, to the one who lives forever and ever, then the 24 elders fall down before the one sitting on the throne, the one who lives forever and ever, and they worship him. They throw their crowns in front of the throne as they say,
You are worthy, Adonai Elohim, to have glory, honor, and power, because you created all things. Yes, because of your will they were created and came into being.
The response was, Holy, holy, holy is Adonai, God of heaven's armies. That brings us directly into our Amidah portion this evening, as we too find ourselves standing as they were in this throne room scene in the presence of that God, and we respond with pages 66 to 71. Please rise, facing Jerusalem, the direction of the ark. It's paragraphs 1 through 3 of the Amidah, including the Kedusha. Utilize these words to respond to the one who sits on heaven's throne. Mikamoka, Al Givurot. Who is like you, Lord of might? Who can be compared to you, O King? Which is why we sanctify your name in the world as they sanctify it in the highest heavens. As it is written by your prophet, they call out to each other, and they say,
Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. All the earth is full of his splendor. Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzadok Melech Kol Haaretz Kevodo.
Then across from them comes back this ringing response.
Praise, praise, be the splendor of the Lord. Everywhere it is manifested. Baruch Kavod Adonai, Min Kamo.
And then in the holy writings, we're further told,
The Lord shall reign forever. Your God, O Zion, for all generations. Yimloch Adonai le'olam. Elohayit Zion Vador Vador. Hallelujah.
so in every generation we will tell of your greatness, and in every age we will proclaim your holiness. Your praise will certainly never depart from our lips, for you are a great and holy God and King. Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Blessed are you, O Lord, you are the holy God. You responded, the Lord shall reign, your God, O Zion, for all generations. And now we continue that response when we say, O Lord, my God, please reign in my life. That's the intention of the Shema as we now turn to pages 34 to 39.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malakuto Leolam Va'ed. Be'ata et Adonai Elohecha bechol alecha u'chol nafshecha u'chol me'echa ve'hayu ha'dvarim ha'eleh asher anochi mitzavcha hayom alecha ve'shimantam la'anecha ve'kibartam ve'shivtecha b'beitecha u'b'atecha ha'adeh Ushachbecha u'chomecha, Ushachtam le'ota yadecha, Ve'hayu latotachot ve'enecha, U'ktavtam al mezuzot beitecha, U'b'sharecha. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord alone. Blessed be he whose glorious kingdom is eternal. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your life, and with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be on your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, and when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as reminders on your hands, and bind them on your foreheads. Write them on the doorframes of your houses and on your gates.
There's coming a time when that will be the reality for all, that they will be written on the door frames of their people's houses and on their gates. It's the reality we anticipate as we turn to pages 88 and 89, 5 and so on. It's the time when the law will go forth from Zion and the word of the Lord in Jerusalem.
Vayehi ben Aharon, vayomer Moshe, Omar Adonai, vayafuso levacha, veyanusu misanecha, mipanecha, ki mitzion teitzei Torah, ki mitzion teitzei Torah, u'levar Adonai b'Yerushalayim. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Baruch shenatan Torah, Torah. Israel, Bikdushato. And it came to pass, whenever the ark went forward, Moses would say, Arise, O Lord, and let your enemies be scattered. May those who hate you flee from before you. For from Zion shall go forth the Torah, and the word of the Lord out of Jerusalem. Blessed be he who in holiness gave the Torah to his people Israel. Yishavarach Hamotinu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov. He who blessed our fathers Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, may he bless Rabbi John, may he bless Jacob, who have come up to honor God and the Torah. May the Holy One bless them and their families, and send blessing and prosperity on all the work of their hands. Baruch hu et Adonai HaMavorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who chose us from all peoples and gave to us the Torah. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
I now invite you to take the order of worship and turn to the inside page, which you've already turned to, near the bottom. Follow along as I read, please. V'adaber Adonai el Moshe b'leimor, Pinchas ben Elazar ben Aharon haKohen, Heshiv et Chamati me'al b'nei Yisrael, V'kano et kaniti betocham. You may be seated. And so begins a very interesting passage. And so the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Pinchas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned away, in a sense reversed, the wrath, judgment, whatever, from on the children of Israel. When he, interesting translations, but let me do a more elaborate translation. When he was zealously filled with my jealousy among them. Very interesting text. It tells us that Pinchas acted in a way in which God, how should we put it, which God approved of, but which reflected God himself. Because he expressed God's response to the situation. It's a very sticky situation. It's a very complicated passage. It's not complicated. It's complex. And all kinds of interpretations flow from it, none of which I will share with you tonight.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chesed Haye olam nata b'tochenu, Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Blessed are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, who gave us the Torah of truth and life everlasting planted in our midst. Blessed are you, Lord, giver of the Torah.
Truly, he was the giver of the Torah. The text, the parsha for this week, reminds us of that when it says, Vadaber Adonai el Moshe. These are the words that God gave to Moses. And through Moses, he gave them to us. And as our ancestors stood before him at that mountain, we stand before him now. And we stand before him now. That means stand up. And as they received his words, so we do as well as we respond with the Zod HaTorah, pages 98 and 99. If you need the transliteration, that's page 95.
Bezot HaTorah asher sam Moshe
Lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi
Adonai beyad Moshe. This is the Torah which Moses placed before the children of Israel. It is in accord with the Lord's command by the hand of Moses.
You may be seated. And we turn now to pages 96 and 97, Etz Chaim, a tree of life.
Etz Chaim hi lama kazikim ba v'tomcheha meushar deracheha da'chei na'am v'kol nativoteha shalom. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu kikedem. Hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuva Chadesh Yameinu kikedem. A tree of life it is to those who take hold of it, and happy are those who support it. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. Turn us, Lord, to you, and let us return. Renew our days as of old.
We turn now to pages 98 and 99 for Uznu Ho Yomar as we rise yet again, reminding ourselves that we find ourselves standing in the presence of the Lord of the universe. As the sign says above the ark, Thou lifnei mi'ata omed. Know before whom it is that you stand. And we do know that, and so we respond on those pages.
Uvnucho Yomar Shura, Adonai Rivavot Alfei Yisrael. When the ark rested, Moses would say, Return, O Lord, to the myriads of Israel's families. Arise, O Lord, to your resting place, you and your mighty ark. Clothe your priests with righteousness. May those who have experienced your faithful love shout for joy. For the sake of your servant David, don't delay the return of your Messiah. Ba'avor David Adech. Al teshev pnei mishachecha. Ki achach tov natati lachem. Torati ata azovu. I give you good instruction. Do not forsake my Torah.
Before you sit down, greet those around you and welcome them. Okay. As the order of worship tells you, and as Patrice also reminded us of the content of tonight's brunch. Yes, I know it's last week's Parsha, and last week, if you remember, Patrice chose to speak not from the Parsha, but from the Haftarah, for which I'm grateful because it gives me the opportunity to look back to last week. As she mentioned last week, it's a text that I enjoy because it's got some delightful stuff in it. So hopefully some of that I can communicate to you as we go along the way. Now, in last week's Parsha, we met that pagan prophet, Bilam, or Balaam, depending on who's translating it, who was hired by Balak, king of Moab, to come and to curse Israel because Balak had heard of Bilam's reputation, as he expressed it. He whom you bless is blessed, and whoever you curse is cursed. Interesting reputation. Even more interesting when you remember where those words come from. You do remember, right? From near the very beginning of the Torah itself. God promised to Abraham, those who bless you will be blessed. Those who curse you will be cursed. So somehow now, as the text begins, that forms part of the background. What you have in this particular text is related to the promises of God going back that far. Okay, so in response, Balaam warns Balak's messengers who come to hire him that no matter how much they should pay him, he can only say what the Lord puts in his mouth. And that sounds great. But as the story unfolds, we can say, well, at least so he says. And you can also pick up the fact that Balak also understood some stuff between the lines when he comes back with a counter offer to Balaam. Well, to condense the story somewhat, Balaam is now on his way to his rendezvous with Balak. And you remember the story. Balaam's donkey stops in her tracks, not once, not twice, but 3 times. And you know the old saying, 3 strikes and you're out. Well, that should have been a message to Balaam, but he didn't get the message. Because this 3rd time, finally, the donkey, to try to get the message across, squeezes Balaam's leg against the wall of the vineyard. Well, she does so because she does not want to encounter what she sees, but he does not see. So it's not only you've got a donkey speaking, as you will see in a moment, but you've got a donkey seeing stuff that a prophet doesn't see. Well, when Balaam beats his donkey, the text says God opens the donkey's mouth. In other words, allows the donkey to speak. And the donkey chews out Balaam. And again, I didn't want to get into that back and forth, which was interesting anyhow. Because that's a rather comical interchange that results in, well, Balaam losing the debate to his donkey, but also in him finally recognizing that the angel of the Lord was barring his way. Now, why this strange story in this particular location? Well, one, because it happened at approximately this time in the story of Israel. But another reason is, in part, it is a setup for the grand prophecies that are about to follow. And it tells us the source of those prophecies so we understand that they're not just some strange prophet's words, but they literally are what are called the oracles of God. And those prophecies map out the destiny and the majesty of God's chosen nation. You know, going back to the promise to Abraham, referenced just a couple minutes ago. Well, the Torah is telling us that the God who could speak truth through the mouth of a donkey can also speak true prophecy about his chosen people through the mouth of a pagan prophet. And so Balaam blesses Israel 4 times. Now, I asked myself, why 4 times? And I'm sure there are all kinds of interesting reasons as to why 4 times, as you read the writings of the rabbis, and particularly all kinds of interesting and sometimes strange commentaries. Some of the stranger ones do not come from Jewish sources, by the way. This is real simple. 3 strikes and you're out. 4 bases, you've hit a home run. So this is a home run of a prophet. You like that? I thought of that just now, for better or worse. And I won't ask you which it is. But anyhow, the first blessing is this, and I'll condense it a bit. How am I to curse those whom God has not cursed? Stop. How am I to curse those whom God has not cursed? This is the wilderness, gang. And I'm sure you've heard all kinds of stories about Israel in the wilderness and how bad they were. The text says, how can I curse what God has not cursed? You get it? Well, the teachers of this passage obviously have not read this text very carefully. God did not curse his people in the wilderness in any fashion. Anyhow, back to what he says. And please remember, it is in the wilderness where so many, as I said, commentators reflect on the rebellion, I think is usually the term, of the Israelites. Well, let me pull some words, some wilderness words for you from tonight's Haftarah, which is yet another one of the reasons I wanted to look at last week's Parsha. It's the closing verses of the Parsha. Try Jeremiah chapter 2, the first 3 verses. Text begins, the word of the Lord came to me. Look, once again, God is speaking. Vadaber Adonai el Moshe. Well, this is Vadaber Adonai el Yirmiyahu. Go and proclaim. Okay? I want everyone to know this. In the hearing Jerusalem, this is what God says. That just adds some weight. Well, here's what is that weighty thing that he's to pronounce. I remember the devotion of your youth. What? This is the wilderness crew. The rebellious, cranky group of people, grumbling all the time. He says what? And remember, this is the word of God. He's now said it twice. So we should pay attention. I remember the what? The devotion of your youth. He further describes it, wonderful metaphor, your love as a bride. As the rabbis reminded us, God entered into a marriage relationship with his people. The wedding was Sinai. Anyhow, I remember the devotion of your youth, your love as a bride, how you stumbled in the wilderness. No, that's not what the text says. How you followed me in the wilderness. What did the people do? They followed him in the wilderness. If that wasn't enough to shock you or to shock those who completely get this story of Israel in the wilderness screwed up, Israel was holy to the Lord. Israel was holy to the Lord in the wilderness? Yes, that's what God says here. And then he goes and provides another metaphor, which I love just as well, the first fruits of his harvest. It's a great vision that describes God's romance with Israel. Israel who followed him out of Egypt and into the wilderness, like a bride devoted to her husband. So the prophet's words then draws our focus or attention beyond our undeniable failures from time to time as a people to the equally undeniable foundation of a people chosen and loved by God who expresses himself in these startling words from Jeremiah. And then the text in the blessing goes on to say, how am I to denounce those whom Adonai has not denounced? Did you catch that again? He's talking about the wilderness group. And he says, I have not denounced them. Next time you hear somebody get sidetracked by this, feel free to shake a finger and quote these verses. But anyhow, you've heard this kind of thing from me before, but now at least you're hearing it yet again from this text. And then here comes an interesting phrase, from the top of the rocks I see them. So, that becomes the foundation for a metaphor, for a midrash that you find in the rabbis. It says, God was out looking for a faithful person on whom to base his people, or his nation. And he searched everywhere for a rock on which he could build a sturdy foundation. And then he says, he found Abraham. And Abraham became the rock of that foundation. By the way, that midrash is in view when Yeshua, standing before the rocky cliff at Banyas, applies it not so much to Peter, but to Peter's faith and his recognition of who Yeshua was. I'm sorry, I sort of got sidetracked from that story. Let's get back to the story. From the rocks, I see them. Yes, a people that will dwell alone and not think itself one of the nations. Well, hang on. And then Balaam closes this first blessing by saying, may I die as the righteous die. May my end be like theirs. Like whose? Like Israel's, who are what? Righteous. God's assessment of Israel. Here we see Israel as a unique people who will not think itself one of the nations. In other words, the nations were nations that were devoted to idols. So when Israel does not think of herself as one of the nations, she's not devoted to the idols, she's devoted to God. But again, we already knew that. God told us about it. No, I'm sorry, this is last week's passage. It's only this week that we know about it from Jeremiah. A blessed people with a holy destiny. A people whom God has not cursed, as he said, but blessed. By the way, just in case you missed the story, this is after Miriam and Aaron had died, which means this is the end of the 40 years experience. So after 40 years, this is God's assessment. Okay, the second blessing. No one has seen guilt in Jacob. Hi, Jacob. Or perceived perversity in Israel. No one has. Oh, yeah? Except all kinds of teachers and commentators, including many in the Messianic movement. This is the word from God about the people in the wilderness. By the way, this is carried on as people reflect on the statements of the prophets. And this is something that really goads Patrice because she teaches from the prophets in the seminary courses. When people do commentaries on the prophets, they tend to reflect almost always and totally on Israel's failures. But that's not the message of the prophets, nor is it the message here. As it says, no one has seen guilt in Jacob or perceived perversity in Israel. The teachers should do a whole lot less of it. We, of course, because we've talked about this before, are already in that space. Oh, by the way, I like the opening phrase. Another one of my hobby horses, so let me step out of the story for a second. No guilt in Jacob. Not just the people, but the papa from whom they came. If you read the Jacob stories correctly, you will come to that same conclusion. That too is misconstrued. Okay, back to our story. Oh, I love this stuff. It's probably too much. It can now be said of Jacob and Israel, what is this that God has done? The prophet is reflecting on the stuff that God did to bring Israel to this particular point. So we see Israel here as the heirs to God's promises, a people strengthened by God, mighty and formidable. Now it's time for Ma Tovu, the third blessing. Ma Tovu Ohaleka Yaakov, Mishkanateka Yisrael. How lovely are your tents, Jacob, your encampments, Israel. Why tents? Why encampments? Well, that's what they lived in. But more than that, I think is a reflection back to another text, another of my favorite texts. It's Leviticus chapter 26, verses 11 and 12, where God says, I will walk among your tents and walk through your encampments. Not only did he have a home, a honeymoon home that he shared with the people in the Mishkan or the tabernacle, Leviticus 26, in a classic text, which, by the way, does also mention some of Israel's failings, but in that text, it says, I will walk among your tents. God was definitely there. Look, Balaam recognized it very clearly. Okay, they spread out like valleys, like gardens by the riverside, like succulent aloes planted by Adonai, like cedar trees next to the water. Water will flow from their branches. Their seed will have water aplenty. Now, when I read this, and you know, as Patrice reminded us last week, this is one of my favorite passages to speak from. It was only yesterday that this connection popped into my mind. Did you hear the description of the well-watered gardens, the stuff that brings forth its fruit in its season? Yeah, that's Psalm chapter 1, the opening psalm, talking about this person will be like a tree planted by streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season, whose leaf does not wither, and whatever this person does will prosper. Wow. Who is this person? Well, the text in verse 2 says, the one whose delight is in the Torah of the Lord, and on his law this person meditates day and night. So if Israel is being described in these terms, and then later we find these terms apply to those who follow in God's guidelines, then what is the implication here? Once again. And then that particular blessing concludes, blessed be all who bless you, cursed be all who curse you, and there it is, Genesis chapter 12, verse 3, where God promises this. So Israel is mighty, strong, formidable against its foes. In fact, just a couple chapters ago, Israel had defeated two great kings, Sihon and Og. But in addition, she is fruitful, blessed, and is a blessing to those who bless her, while those who seek to curse Israel will themselves be cursed. And then we have the fourth blessing. And this is a classic. They're all classics, but this is a classic. I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not soon. A star will step forth from Jacob. A scepter will rise from Israel. Once again, notice it's from Jacob. This star to come, which is a messianic text, connection to Jacob. It should tell us a little more about the kind of character and model, wonderful model that Jacob was. But anyhow, back to our text. A scepter will rise from Israel. By the way, Balaam went back to his home area, and he also did some traveling. So throughout this area of the Middle East, Balaam and Balaam's prophecies were probably fairly well known. And I'm going to suggest, because they were well known, that there came a time when those in the Persian courts saw a star rise. And because they had also known Daniel, they knew when it would rise. And they followed that star. Where? To where it would rise. In Bethlehem. Okay. I'm talking about the Magi, if you hadn't put that together yet. His enemies will be his possessions, Edom and Seir, and Israel will do valiantly. Edom, just a few chapters before, had refused them entry. Well, what goes around comes around, as they say. But here we now see the one who ultimately fulfills God's purposes for Israel, the Messiah. He will be Israel's protector and vindicator against her enemies. Now, as Patrice spelled it out for us last week, the haftarah that goes with this is Micah chapter 5, verse 6 to chapter 6, verse 8. Now, are you ready for this astounding hermeneutical insight? Micah 5:6 comes after Micah 5:1-5. Ooh. Which begins, but you, Bethlehem, although you are little among the clans of Judah, out of you will come forth for me the one who will be ruler for my people Israel. It's talking about the Messiah to be born in Bethlehem. It also describes him in that opening paragraph as the one who will shepherd his people, the good shepherd. And it also describes him as the one in whom is peace, which reminds me of a text called the Hanukkah Haggadah, which says Hanukkah is the festival that welcomes the Messiah. Quoting now Micah 5, I think it's verse 4, could be verse 5. Welcomes the Messiah. He is our peace. Oh well, but back to our text. Notice that the one is here called Beit Lachmi, the Bethlehemite. As in our Shabbat prayers as we began, Lecha Dodi. He's the one through whom these culminating blessings will come over Israel. Cool stuff, I hope. It is to me. So we ask that question from the Yiddish. No? So? Well, now we go back to last week's Haftarah again, the closing verse. In the end, what is it that the Lord requires of us? And the text, to do justly, love mercy, and to walk humbly with our Lord God. By the way, this text is quoted in a classic Talmudic text, and I have forgotten its reference. Now it didn't pop into my mind. So anyhow, talks about the 613 commandments. And he says they are reduced to 15, then to 11, then to 6, then to 3, these verses. So it's summarized in this fashion. Here's what God expects of us and expects of us today. It's to do justly. Interesting term here. It's the term mishpat, which is often connected with the term tzedakah. It has to do with acting justly in the sense of making sure the oppressed get true justice. And tzedakah, by the way, tells us the way in which it's carried it out. Tzedakah is described in rabbinic circles as charitable rightness. So when we do things that are just, it needs to be done in charitable rightness. I don't have time to expand on that any further. To love mercy. I looked this up. It literally is the love of mercy. Has to do with love, yes, but it has to do with mercy as well. Mercy, as Patrice mentioned it last week, chesed. We think of mercy in a certain way, and that's okay, but chesed is far deeper than that. It's virtually untranslatable, often translated simply loving kindness in the Old English, but it is compassionate, loyal love, and merciful love, the way in which we should act with people. And then it says to walk humbly with our God. Walk humbly. Well, let's think of the haftarah for tonight. Israel walked with God in the wilderness as a bride with her husband. Psalm 1, remember the text that was alluded to. Blessed is the person who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the way of sinners. But this person's delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his Torah this person meditates day and night. That's the one who's like a tree. That's what walking humbly is. Walking humbly, too, is the text that we respond with when the Torah processes among us. What is it, O Israel, that the Lord God requires of you? Justice. Fear him. Serve him. Love him. Walk in all his ways. So there it is. The 613 can be exemplified by this. And even a donkey knows that. And now you do too. Take the next minute or so in quiet as you respond. Please join me now in standing as we respond and as we remind ourselves of two things, several things, but let me stress two. And we're going to be facing Jerusalem in the direction of the